Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrael Hawkins. Well, U.S.-China relations from 45 years ago to today, keeping food from immigrants seems a little harsh. Bill Gates on how easy it is to put diseases into the population and the form of biological warfare, and the New World Order. Well, this and more in today's broadcast, but first, Henry Kissinger, the former U.S. National Security Advisor, was in office in 1972 and was a part of the U.S. delegation to China that helped draft the Shanghai Communique. Well, 50 years later, how has the relations between the United States and China changed? Well, pay close attention to this interview with CGTV's The Heat and former National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger.
This year marks the 45th anniversary of the signing of the Shanghai Communique. You were very much involved in negotiation, the drafting of it. Now looking back, how significant is this piece of document in bringing U.S.-China relationship to where it is today?
The Shanghai Communique was the decisive expression of the new relationship. It stated the objective of cooperation. In it, the United States affirmed and accepted the principle of one China, and China indicated its desire for progress in our relationship on the basis of negotiation. So it was the formal expression of the new relationship.
But we know it was not easy to get to where you got. I mean, in the run-up to the signing of the document, there were domestic politics on both sides. You were at the height of the Cold War, but still you and the Chinese leadership made it happen. Any lessons and experiences that you think this current U.S. administration can learn from?
Well, the leaders of both sides decided that conflict between China and the United States would be a disaster for both people and would be unfortunate for the rest of the world. And in the current situation, these principles are, if anything, even stronger. In the current situation, these principles are, if anything, even stronger. I think it is essential for China and the United States to think of each other as potential partners, not as potential adversaries, and to solve their disputes on the basis of long-term cooperation. If we do not do this, the whole world will be divided, and other countries will be tempted to take advantage of that situation. And with modern technology and with the needs of the populations on both sides, it is essential that cooperation is the basic principle. It is essential that cooperation is the basic principle. That was true 45 years ago. It is in many respects even more true today.
President Trump said he would impose tariffs on Chinese goods up to 45%, named China a currency manipulator. And if you look at his picks for commerce, treasury secretaries, senior staffers, advisors, he may very well do that. What would be the consequences, in your opinion?
One can expect that people like myself and those leading Americans who for 8 administrations have pursued a common policy will continue to believe in those principles and will continue to advocate them. And I think in the end, President Trump will also follow comparable principles, that people like myself and those leading Americans who for 8 administrations have pursued a common policy will continue to believe in those principles and will continue to advocate them. And I think in the end, President Trump will also follow comparable principles.
But President Trump is surrounded by people like Steve Bannon, who said a few months ago that U.S. and China, quote, are going to a war in South China Sea, and there's no doubt about it. I mean, Steve Bannon sits in the Council of National Security.
I think a war between China and the United States would be a misfortune for the peoples of both countries and for the peoples of the world. So I do not believe that we can build our policy on the expectation of confrontation with China, nor should China do it on its side. And so many things are said in domestic debates. The basic principles should be maintained.
Mm-hmm. And then I don't want to talk about domestic politics, but in President Trump's inauguration speech, he emphasized America first, the merit of protectionism, where President Xi, a week later at Davos, stressed the importance of open and free trade and strengthening of globalization. Do you see this as somehow a shift in the balance of power in terms of global leadership?
For the first time in history, the different continents can now participate in creating an international order. For the first time in history, the different continents can now participate in creating an international order. For the first time in history, the different continents can now participate in creating an international order. That has never happened before. So President Trump has stated his views in his inaugural address. President Xi put forward a global view. I believe we will wind up with an agreement on international order, will wind up with an agreement on international order, and we will not focus so much on what individuals have said at particular intervals. I have had the honor of meeting President Trump on several occasions, and I have every hope that the objectives that I described will find their way into the ultimate American policy.
Well, Katan, I can see why people are now worried with the Trump administration there, why they're worried about that agreement, whether or not it's going to be kept. So we'll have to see.
Yeah.
Well, priests in the Philippines, like in many countries, are highly respected and loved. Inside Asia's biggest Catholic church, reports of sexual abuse have been kept quietly swept under the rug by the most powerful organization in the Philippines. Not the government, but the Catholic Church. Now, one priest is going against the Catholic grain, having not just children of the church, but his own children, along with a partner, which puts him at odds with the Catholic Church's order of celibacy.
Well, not obeying the rule of celibacy is considered sexual misconduct by the Catholic Church. Well, Father Elmer Ehrlich said that he's been trying to get the church to reconsider the rule and to get the bishops and Rome's attention to their pleas to reconsider the rule on celibacy, even going as far as sending letters and emails for the church to accept him and his family.
Well, even though the teaching of the Catholic Church for priests is to remain celibate to show devotion to God, Ehrlich said in the church, when we talk about celibacy, that was only a man-made rule. God did not say this, so I cannot think that I've committed sin. But senior church officials condemn 3 priests in the same situation as disgraceful renegades, and that they're outside of the church and that the church can't do anything about them.
It's interesting how they consider priests who actually marry or have a wife and have children within that family as sexual misconduct. That's
right. And as he said, it's a man-made rule. It's not written in the Bible, which they're supposed to follow.
Yeah, interesting that they don't. Well, Catholic Archbishop Oscar Cruz, who heads the National Tribunal of Appeals, said that church senior officials are sometimes slow to punish he said, 1 in 5 priests who say that they have fathered children. Well, Cruz said that these cases are becoming more and more likely, along with cases of sexual abuses of children by priests. He handles up to 60 cases at a time, but says that this is just the tip of the iceberg, as, of course, bishops can investigate cases or abuse cases within their own jurisdiction and don't have to even bring it to the tribunal.
There are 82 jurisdictions in the Philippines. He said if all the cases were sent to him, he would drown. Cruz said in regards to the long-standing abuse, gone are the days when you can just close your eyes and plug your ears, referring to the bishops there. They can't do that anymore, as if nothing is happening. Now, cases of abuse are on the rise because people are also denouncing the errancy of priests, along with more reports on pedophilia and homosexuality.
Well, Father Jamie Akakoso of the Canon Law Society of the Philippines said of investigations being mishandled by the Catholic Church that, well, yes, those investigations weren't handled well, and problems continue to fester, and priests continue to be there, meaning that they continue in the ministry and also in positions of abusers. Well, how the church handles these matters is very important because, well, no one outside the Catholic Church scrutinizes it, including the government.
Well, the church is so powerful in the Philippines it even toppled 2 presidents and lobbied against government policies. Over 80% of the people follow the church. In fact, in 2014, a 15-year-old choir girl reported sexual abuse at her local church to the police, but her God-fearing family forced her to drop the case. As a result, the priest beat the girl, telling her that what she did by going and reporting it to the police was wrong. She said she was treated like a dog and given $150 to keep quiet about the abuse, which, by the way, to a poor farm girl, that is considered a fortune.
Yeah, and it's sad, when people actually are trying to look up to these men and leaders as moral authorities, people that they can go to, that they're actually being taken advantage of them by them. Well, one woman, Marian Aldia, a former nun who helps church abuse victims, said that cases as young as 6 have been reported to her, but a lot of these cases don't get reported because of fear of being cursed, and people think they're actually going to be cursed by God. She said the church is not just a religious institution, but it's also a political institution. The power of the church is so big, you can never really pursue these things because, as she said, you will never win.
Well, YPN News has been following the migrant crisis across Europe. In Calais, France, there has been an uprooting of migrants from the so-called Calais jungle. Now, Larry McGee is reporting on this story. Larry, what has become of the migrants that who settled down in these new areas, and how is the government treating them at this point?
In response to the flood of refugees seeking passage through and residence within France, the mayor of Calais is opting to employ starvation as a weapon, having recently issued a municipal ban on food banks for incoming refugees. The city's head asserts that the measure is an essential part of restoring order in the city. Mayor Bocard says she took the decision to make sure that no permanent base or squat is created around Calais. Analysts say the move is intended to prevent the reemergence of so-called jungle camps, citing a previous settlement that had developed into a tent city with approximately 10,000 people with its own economy, restaurants, and beauticians. Amid heavy controversy and opposition, the camp was ultimately demolished, igniting clashes between large groups of refugees and local authorities. Many migrants are merely passing through, hoping to land ultimately in places like Britain, but reports are that French authorities are under pressure to show that they are cracking down. The city of Calais is thought to be one of the poor areas of France, and the problem is, analysts say, that refugees just keep on coming. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, if they already haven't, they're definitely going to have a major humanitarian crisis on their hands with holding food back from the people, including the women and children as well. Sad. Well, Bill Gates says it's time to redirect some of the world's military spending to prepare for an ever-increasing threat, terrorists with pathogens. That's right. He's making the claim that bioterrorism is as dangerous a threat to humanity as nuclear war and climate change. Well, in a speech at the Munich Security Conference in Germany this past month, Gates pushed the need for investment in new vaccine technology, medical research, and preparedness for bioterrorist attacks.
In his speech, he said, quote, "We also face a new threat that the next epidemic has good chance of originating on a computer screen of terrorists intent on using genetic engineering to create a synthetic version of the smallpox virus or contagious and highly deadly strain of flu." So at this point, he said that we ignore the strong link between house security and international security at our peril.
Well, continuing, he went on to say whether it occurs by the quirk of nature or at the hand of a terrorist, epidemiologists show through their models that a respiratory spread pathogen would kill more than 30 million people in less than a year. Well, the billionaire who co-founded the Microsoft company turned philanthropist in 2008, he also invested heavily in health initiatives around the globe.
Well, we turn now to another man who has been outspoken on his views for the world since his controversial book, The Population Bomb, came out in 1968. That man is Paul Ehrlich, now 84, but still contributing to the discussion on what may cause the extinction of the world's population.
Yes, an American biologist, Ehrlich is of Jewish descent who growing up saw the invention of a television, computer, and the nuclear bomb. While he still believes the Earth cannot support its ever-growing population, well, he warns that the call to increase spending on a bigger nuclear arsenal is the biggest threat to the extinction of the planet. Well, let's listen to some of the recent comments that he made.
So, very, very important. And I'm pleased to say that one of the best statements on the ethical issues came from Pope Francis. If I can quote from Laudato Si, it's probably I mispronounced it. Each year sees the disappearance of thousands of plant and animal species which we will never know, which our children will never see, because they have been lost forever. The great majority become extinct for reasons related to human activity. Because of us, thousands of species will no longer give glory to God by their very existence, nor convey their message to us. We have no such right, and I would say, amen. The causes of extinction are clear. I always insist on bringing up a potential cause of extinction that is not getting enough attention right now, In fact, when the Trump administration came in, Environmental Health Sciences asked me to write an article about what we should be doing. And the first thing I said was not stopping extinctions, for instance. It was to get something done about the nuclear weapons situation. Because if we continue, the U.S. this is a place where the U.S. has been particularly bad, including Hillary Clinton, but although Trump has recently announced that we are going to build a lot more nuclear weapons so we can be top of the pack there. I have to tell you that John Holdren and John is Ann and my closest friend probably, John and Sherry. He was Obama's science advisor. About 50 years ago, when we were drunk and were doing some calculations on nuclear weapons, we decided it would take to wipe out the United States as a functional entity about 12 Hiroshima-sized bombs, and to get rid of Russia it would only take 10 or 11. Because all you have to do, you see, besides knocking out the electric grid, is hit the main transport centers, and then everybody starves to death. And it turned out that Russia's system had fewer nodes you had to hit than the U.S. And of course, we got thousands pointed at them now, many of them in silos in North America particularly, where they're extremely dangerous, easily accidentally launched, easily accidentally launched, and we've had many close calls. And if you think biodiversity is going to last into its present state through a large-scale nuclear war, or even a small one between India and Pakistan, for example, which has been studied, you're wrong. It's going to be a disaster, not just for Homo sapiens, but for biodiversity. And in this case, of all the possible sources of collapse, a large-scale nuclear war is the one where it's hardest to see any kind of a recovery. So I have to say that on top of all this, we have been overusing the atmosphere as a sink for greenhouse gases. And there, I have to say, the person in the world who has done more to initiate work to get it changed has been Pope Francis. It's one of the biggest threats that humanity faces, and I think his coming out on it was maybe the most important single thing that anybody has done so far to move in the right direction on climate change. One of the reasons I tend to be pessimistic about the state of the world is the growth mania that afflicts our society. I think every colleague that'll speak to me, and there's a few anyway, agrees that you can't grow forever on a finite planet, that the biggest problem we face is continual expansion of the human enterprise. You know, I would love to see hundreds of trillions of human beings live over the next few million years, rather than see if we can cram 11 billion in by 2110, and then let the whole thing go down the drain. A lot of us have been looking at the issue of how do we soften the collapse. I'm convinced, and some of my colleagues are too, we're already in a societal collapse. We are looking at issues of how you soften the collapse, and the really tricky part, and the part where I think it ties to the stories we ought to tell and what we ought to be thinking about and the things we ought to tell the kids, is not just how you soften the collapse, and we hope by discussing that we might even avoid the full collapse, 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 the full collapse.
Well, some interesting comments by Mr. Paul Ehrlich, especially the points where he said how these nuclear weapons could be accidentally launched. Of course, that's been in the news here recently, and people are concerned about that because once they're launched, you can't reach out there and pull them back. And of course, that's going to trigger the launch from other nations where they're pointed. But also when he mentioned this, the collapse of society, how they see it coming, but they're just hoping to soften it. They see the collapse, but they want to soften the blow. That's right. Well, more and more people are beginning to see that the direction the world is heading is pretty bleak. Yisrael Hawkins has explained the Bible prophecies that speak of our very time period and how after these nuclear wars, there will be few men left. Well, don't get caught up in this collapse. Contact the House of Yahweh today and find out what you can do to protect yourself and your family.
When you contact the House of Yahweh, don't forget to request your free copies of the monthly newsletter and the Prophetic Word magazine. To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. You can visit them on any of their websites at www.yahweh.com, www.yisroelhawkins.com, www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website at www.ypnnews.com. And to email the House of Yahweh, you can email them at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And of course, don't forget the latest and of course the best resources to Bible study, the Yisroel Says and the Ask Yisroel program. You can find those by going to www.yisroelsays.com and www.askyisrael.com.
Well, before we turn it over to Yisroel Hawkins, we'd like to remind our viewers of a few very special events coming up at the House of Yahweh, Yeshua's Memorial and the Feast of Unleavened Bread.
Now, the Feast of Unleavened Bread is tentatively set for April 10th through 18th. That's contingent upon the sighting of the first new moon. So plan now to make your preparations to attend the feast at the House of Yahweh.
And if you are serious and would like to attend one of Yahweh's feasts, then contact the House of Yahweh and register early to reserve your place. Well, from all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.